tell by the title, what we're going to be touching base upon is you may think I'm about to go into historical components of these particular groups, but no, there's a message behind what I'm saying here in this topic. And so this is not anything I'm saying is just a perspective. It's just to potentially bring discussions up and see what you guys may think about it. So we're talking about the Nortenos, Surenos, Bulldogs, and so forth. And I'm going to turn this into a whole different direction as opposed to what I normally do. Because what this whole thing is about the Raza struggle, going back to the days of before the Spaniard conquest with the three alliances, Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, Tacloban. And their group was this was a loose alliance, but was powerfully structured to where they used to press a lot of the other native tribes. These are true facts, which also turned in against their own people when the Spanish tried to conquer. And what I'm trying to get at, right, is, I did an interview with an upstate Sureno, Güero from VSM, Varios Sureños Malitos. Shouts out to him. Good dude, man. Really righteous, man. He pushes a positive message, man. And what he discussed in my second interview on Stories Written by a Current Prisoner was that, he discussed about the conflicts with the upstate Sureños, that as they got deeper up north and got more established, they turned on their own, right? And then he said that he doesn't understand, but he said he thinks it's in our raza, in our bloodlines, in our heritage, that we always turn on our own people. He goes, when in the work field construction sites, he said that, you start to have Mexicanos and Chicanos, whatever you want to label them as, the raza, they're always competing. They're always trying to one up the next man, and they're always trying to be superior. And this is kind of a trend that you kind of see, because if you look at all these particular groups, racial makeups, you look at the Africanos, you look at the Asians and whites. Yes, they have conflicts within their own people. They have factions that branch off. But even within the heritage of the raza, they have a stronger influence as far as groups deciding to become divided. Like look at the SMY gangs that they have today, the Northern Riders, the True Fivers, Zapatistas, Nuestra Cosa. These are all groups that respond upon their feelings of being either oppressed or wanting to go in a whole different direction. And see, when I think of the Surenos, Nortenos, and Bulldogs, which they've all have almost similar messages in some extent. The Surenos in general, man, like as we already know, they were put under the umbrella of the MA real early to do their bidding. They were instilled with the thoughts that the Nortenos were, if NF were only farmeros from rural areas, and that they were superior to them. And all kinds of addition stuff. Nortenos in return were given the same types of teachings as far as, okay, the MA's out to oppress the Nortenos, the Surenos do their bidding. We're being put in a position to where we just want our equal rights and our equal justice. With that comes a movement, it comes a cause. But what happens with the cause of all these Raza groups is they end up turning on their own. The Bulldogs formed off that. Whether it was propaganda or not, I'm saying a lot of the dictations that were being implemented by the NF forced a lot of these Bulldogs to make that choice. And see, that pattern continues. And that's what this topic's all about, man. I'm trying to have a positive message here, but I'm trying to bring to light some serious issues. This has been a trend that's been going on for years, all the way back to the ancient days of Mexica, within the indigenous people having conflicts. And you continue to see the same things within these groups. I'm saying? The Norteños, Sureños, Bulldogs, whatever, they're all of the Raza descent, period. Even when you see comments sometimes like, I race them, but you start seeing stuff like, scrap killer, buster killer, bullfrogs, whatever. All derogatory remarks of disrespect, and one side feeling they're superior over the next. You see the trend pattern here, and what people fail to realize that regardless of where someone is from geographically, the bloodlines remain the same. That fight remains the same. Just like there's a lot of solid Norteños, Sureños, and Bulldogs that are straight with the business that get active. There's also dudes that are just trash. So in all essence, there's no particular group that is really superior to the next, because in doing so, you're feeling better than you are than your own people, your own guidelines. And that's where all this type of division, dissension has occurred. And it's been a track record that's been going on for years. I don't know if in generalized terms, if this is just mainly something like the machismo, the ego is more stronger in that culture. You know what I'm saying? Because you see it all the time, man. We all got egos. We all got, what I'm saying, that machismo, we want to be that dude. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to look at as inferior to anybody. I think every man has that type of mindset. But when it comes to gangs, that's where it becomes a problem. You know, you don't have all these black groups and Asian groups that are sub-faction, like 20 different factions. See, the unity is the hardest conquest in all of this, because something along those lines always deters people from going down that path. You know, and like I said, Weddle made a perfect example of that when they finally got established up north. In the beginning, they were getting it bad. He kept it 100. He goes, man, we were getting it bad out there. There was very few people that were down to ride and so forth. But a couple of them kept on pushing, and they ended up having enough to, basically plant their flags in certain areas. And once that happened, you know, as they continued to grow, they started to be a lot more conflict. The same thing with the Nortenos. Same thing with the Surenos down south. I mean, the Surenos down south, the Varios fight each other. Raza'S killing Raza. And so I'm bringing this topic up, man, because what causes all this? I mean, what is your perspective of it? You know, I think, growing up in the cultural era from like the 1930s on, when the Pachucos came up, the Mi Vida Loca and so forth, which basically branched off as an identity. You know, people don't realize that, you know, those that were coming over here after the Mexican Revolution, the country was in a very depressed state over there in Mexico. So a lot of them migrated to California to establish better means for their family. And so when a lot of them were going to school at that time, you know, they were being classified as Caucasians, believe it or not as negros. And what happened was they were being taught in schools that their culture, their heritage, the traditional Mexican ways were almost like a pagan type of thought. You know what I mean? This was being instilled in the schools. You couldn't speak Spanish and so forth in schools. So a lot of what you would call Mexicanos that were first generation that moved over here and so forth, they're being taught that their culture is wrong and to try to adapt to this more white culture, this more American culture. So what ends up happening is there was a lot of rejection to that. And what every group wants to do is they want to form their own type of identity. Therefore, that's when the Pachuco look came, which is a combination of through El Paso, Texas, which was adapted through some of the African jazz music in some of the clubs, as well as El Pachuca, Mexico, which I think is in Hidalgo, which they used to wear a lot more baggier clothes. But what the Chicanos did, like any other group, it's like going to high school. You know, like if you've ever been to a diversified high school, you'll see about 8-10 different groups that dress different, look different. This is that same pattern. They identify something that meant to them. And coming into these urban communities that were very poor and crime ridden, you know what I'm saying? They adapted that crime lifestyle. And so naturally, what do? When you're living in that criminal element and you're feeling oppressed, you got to let out all that aggression. So it was common for people to start battling and gangs starting to form and wars. And so the conflict within a lot of these Chicano barrios started to occur. You know what I'm saying? But in the beginning, it was all about identity crisis. Everything has to do with an identity. You know what I'm saying? Not wanting to accept the white ways that were trying to be enforced on them, not trying to be with some of the traditional ways, trying to make your own identity. And that's where you get all these different looks from that perspective. Now, it's just been guerra and war amongst people that are of Mexican descent or even other Latino countries for years, you know, and it's just, like I said, it's just something that's been instilled in people, not just now, but 500 years ago. Wars, being a soldier, being a guerrero, and conflicts have arisen. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if you look over there, what's going on in Mexico, there's all kinds of warring factions. There's all kinds of divisions within these groups, you know, and it's a power struggle because every man wants what the next man has or more. Therefore, when they maintain it, the proper usage of it is where everything goes wrong. I was instilled with a lot of these hatreds towards certain groups, and you know what I'm saying, the teachings and indoctrinations and the schooling will lead you in a whole different direction as opposed to what's right there in front of you. And if you really take a step back, what is the true struggle? The struggle is within your own people, your own heritage to get along. That's the struggle. Forget the Norteño struggle, forget the Sureño plight, forget the Bulldog nation, whatever you want to call it, right? The struggle is within Raza not oppressing their own, not trying to feel superior to their own. Because no matter which group starts to branch off and establish themselves, the same thing starts to occur. Oppression, control, all these things occur, you know, but which we can start as a righteous plight, as a righteous movement. And see, that's why a lot of things with the Chicano movement didn't go as far as it should have. There was a lot of factions in the revolutionary years, you know what I'm saying, due to counterpole and different tactics employed by the government. They were able to create that division. They were able to infiltrate. And see, that's what people need to wake up, man. Like, who is the real struggle? Who's your own enemy? Not your own people. But in turn, that's what I see. You know, as a Norteño going into the system, I've said this before, we were instilled with the thought that the enemy was out to oppress us, that the Surenos were doing their bidding, that because we were low in numbers, we had to secure ourselves and be strong and present a strong, united front. Therefore, we were to stand against our own people. You know what I'm saying? Same thing with the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs have been taught different. You know, we're not under the dictations of the bonds. They want to tell Fresno what to do. We're our own man. You know, and then our whole propaganda, you know, oh, they branched off from us. They sided with some dropouts and this and that. You see what I'm saying? The whole pattern here is that the Raza chooses to struggle with its own people. Instead of uniting towards a common plight and goal, they don't. And you can look, just go look at the Vados down south and the Vados up north. It's been war, it's been guerra. There's been more killings amongst your own people than there is with any other race or groups. Those are facts. You know, I guess it's more easier to I'm not gonna say easier, but I guess most people have the need or desire to funk within their own people, because it's almost like there's a competition and stuff of who's better as a man. But if you really think back to it, man, like Surenos said in one of my videos, they eat beans, they have abuelas, all that stuff. It's basically the same heritage, the same culture, you know? And there's been a whole lot of misconceptions and so forth, man. But, you know, what it comes down to is individuals trying to create false narratives for their own self-purpose, you know? And there's more corruption and destruction that occurs from the higher-ups, from the narratives that they pushed, than pushing the truth. None of this stuff was supposed to occur, the North or South. You know, it was just a temporary thing that no one thought was going to get out of hand. It was all for recruiting processes and so forth, you know what I mean? And it just basically got out of hand. And basically you have two factions that became pawns to a whole group that really in the beginning didn't even care about neither one of these groups. It was just another control mechanism to do their bidding. Smart moves if you're a criminal organization, but no one's really recognizing the truth. You know, I mean, you see attacks, and like I said, in the comment section sometimes, SK and BK, it's like, man, you're attacking your own people. You're attacking those that probably maybe from the same bloodlines, maybe even from the same village in Mexico. Why so much hate? You know, why so much competition? Why trying to put out who's better than the next? And so these are things that really need to be discussed and thought of, because I know a lot of gente, right? They won't want to admit it. They could be in a cell for 10 years doing time, and shit happens. But they also could be in a shoe pod where they have some Surenos that they talk to or whatever. And then you start to realize, well, what's this conflict really about, man? Like, what's occurring? You know what I mean? What are the issues really? You know, everybody wants to be the top dog. You know what I mean? Everybody wants a piece of the pie. You know, you would think that if people put their egos to the side and say, look, we can get so much done for the community. We could get so much more done with prison reform and so forth for our people. And what I mean by people, the Raza descent, if we work together. But people put too much of their personal emotions, right? And their threat of power. That's what it comes down to. People are insecure that they're going to lose their power. You know what I'm saying? So this is the Raza struggle. The perpetual struggle is to unify your people towards a common goal. And what I mean by people, it means Nortenos, Surenos, Bulldogs, because there's no common goal that is being pursued. Because if there was a common goal being pursued, so much more could be obtained. You know what I'm saying? In California, look how many Vados are out there from north to south to Fresno. Look how many people are actively with the functions that will fall under one umbrella. There's a lot. But then now you've also started to spur other factions, you know, the Raza struggle. Now it's just not Norteños, Sureños, and now Bulldogs. Now you have New Flowers. Now you have 2-5ers, Compa Riders, Northern Riders, Nuestra Cosa, Zapatistas, and all kinds of factions. So it's something that people have to really consider, man. Like, what is the cause of these things? What creates this stuff? And like I've always said, the threat of oppression, the threat of those acting superior over you. So sometimes people have a bad taste due to prison politics or dictations that are put upon them. Therefore, when you back a dog into a corner, eventually it's going to fight back. And that's what has occurred over and over again within the Raza struggle. The Raza struggle is to be unified towards a common goal. You know what I'm saying? And don't get me wrong, I'm not a promoter of gangs or anything, man. I try to pursue people to follow a different path, but that doesn't mean I forget where I come from. So when I'm doing these messages to tell people about the life that I live and the experiences I made, the experiences I went through, I'm trying to relay that message to someone out there that may be going through a similar thing. And I'm trying to open people's eyes so things can go in a whole different direction. Because until things change, man, you know, you're going to have the same results. And 10, 15, 20 years ago, you didn't have people like that had a platform like this that could put that message out there, can make people think, can make people, you know, question their decisions and their choice. And a lot of people don't want to keep it raw and real. You got to keep it raw and real in this. If you want to see any type of, like I said, drastic change, positive values and so forth, in building gaps, in repairing relationships, you have to keep it raw and real. You have to think outside the box. You can't be tunnel vision where this is what you've been taught for years and this is the only thing you know. You got to see the whole fucking picture. Because when you're blinded, man, you're not going to see what's right there that could be valuable asset to everybody. And this is just me spitting it real. You know, in the future, I'm going to do some spills about like Bulldog history, Norteno history, a little more Surenos stuff. You know what I mean? Just my personal perspective, my views, what I've done, what I've gone through in research, and I always put my view on it, man. Doesn't mean I'm always right, you know what I mean? But doesn't mean I'm always wrong either. So this topic right here is kind of an open platform for you guys to think right here. You know what I mean? Why does the Raza struggle so much within its own people? How can we solve this? What solutions are in the future? And this isn't to promote no super gang or nothing like that, man, but it's to promote change, man, because in the communities a lot of us grew up in, the gangs and the OGs have a lot of influence over people. So we have to push this positive message for people to see the truth of what's really going on, man. You know, and until people wake up and see that the only people they're struggling against is their own people, we're going to have the same results over and over again. Times have evolved, but things haven't changed is what I'm getting at. Anyways, this is your boy Flacco. I am from Convict's perspective. Real talk with Flacco, man. Always spitting some type of game and just trying to keep it real, man. I'm out. Peace.